Welcome to the Norris Group's 13th annual I Survived Real Estate Gala. The Norris Group would like to thank the following platinum partners: Norada Real Estate Investments, San Diego Creative Investors Association, the Outspoken investor Tony Alvarez, Think Realty Magazine, and Realty 411. We'd also like to thank our gold sponsors, Seven Figure Flipping, Inland Valley Association of Realtors, Keller Williams Corona, Keystone CPA Inc., Brisas Escrow, Leivas Tax Wealth Management, In a Day Development, NorCal REIA, NSDREI, Pasadena FIBI, Real Wealth Network, SoCal Cash Flow, Spinnaker Loans, and uDirect IRA.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the 13th annual I Survived Real Estate. My name is Aaron Norris, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening, and thank you for being here tonight. Typically, we'd be seeing you all in person, dressed to the nines at the Nixon Presidential Library. White House Catering would have wined and dined us. MTV would have produced a glorious event at the East Room, replica of the White House, and a lineup of national speakers would be sharing the night, giving us their insights and joining us on stage live. Well, early summer, it was clear that we had to make a shift. We started I Survived Real Estate in 2008 during the peak of the financial fallout to celebrate an industry that was going through a lot of change and to celebrate an industry in decline and a lot of change. And it felt like 2020, this was needed more than ever. There's lots of risk, there's lots of uncertainty, and our industry is thriving when a lot of other sectors in the economy are really faltering and struggling. So I Survived Real Estate this time is in two sessions. This week is California's residential town hall. We've brought together some of our biggest supporters and experts from all over the state of California to discuss what's at risk for our industry, disruptions that is changing our work, and how politics at the local, state, and national levels could impact what we do. Next week, after the presidential election, we bring back our national, commercial, and town hall. Not bring back, we introduce it. So 2 nights. We purposely planned it after the election because depending on who becomes president could change a lot of things in our industry. And we thought that that was really important. And everybody on that panel participates in a different real estate sector. All are involved in very different states all over the country. Some are involved in commercial, some are wholesalers and do volume flipping. Should be very interesting. So they'll be sharing with us a lot of information and what they see coming up for 2021 with the knowledge of who is going to be, hopefully we'll know who's president at that point with that information. So next week, we will announce our grand total. We are extremely close to the $1 million mark raised for charity since we started this event in 2008. And I would just sincerely like to thank everybody who's been part of this event, whether you've been in the audience, a longtime sponsor. When we produce the video, it will be the grand deep voice gentleman who produces that sound for us to give them proper celebration, because we really appreciate your help. 100% of what we raise actually goes to Make-A-Wish and St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. If you've been invited by one of our generous sponsors tonight and you feel inspired, please go to isurviverealestate.com and hit that video button, and you'll be able to find out how you can give. Later, if you're watching this on Amazon Prime, YouTube, or listening to this on the podcast, please do the same. isurviverealestate.com, and you can find out how you can give, but you can also find out how you can watch the video. You can find out we'll be producing some kind of program like we usually do, and you can find all that there. And of course, the donations this year are tax deductible as always. First bit of business tonight, I will show a brief clip of what brings us all together, and then I'm going to introduce you to Gloria Crockett with Make-A-Wish. Give me just a second. It'll be wonderful to edit this out later. Hang on.
To have a gaming computer was granted? excited?
What do you think?
Firemen are dropping a package from way up high.
Gloria, thank you so much for being here today and for being such an incredible partner. Your team has been so awesome. What some people don't realize is that you work so closely with the Norris Group, making sure that 100% of all the money raised actually goes directly to charity. So just thank you very much. You're in your first year as being CEO. You're going into your second year, and a pandemic, this must be a challenging time. So thank you for being here. And we'd love to hear more about Make-A-Wish.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Aaron. Excuse me, I just got a little bit of a frog in my throat right then. So you guys saw that amazing video, and I want to share with you guys how important it is to have hope, because hope is truly essential. And what we've been doing with COVID, with our children that are critically ill between the ages of 2.5 and 18, has been different this last, 6 or 7 months. And it's going to continue to be different for the next 6 or 7 months. But what I can say is that we are doing everything in our power to make sure that wishes come true. And I want to say, first of all, thank you to each and every one of you for all that you're doing to make sure that these wishes come true, because it's so vital and part of the recovery for those children that are sick. So we've been around since 1983, our chapter here in Orange County and the Inland Empire. And the different types of wishes that we've provided are I wish to have, I wish to give, I wish to meet, I wish to go, I wish to be. And I want you guys to take a moment. I know that we're trying to be as interactive as possible when we're having different type of Zoom meetings. So I want you guys to close your eyes. I want to tell you about a wish that recently happened. So think about this. There's a little boy who's really sick. He's on his way to have his wish, but he doesn't know it. His wish is to have a blue Lamborghini and to have his dad drive in it. So they pull up to the montage. The little boy's asleep in the back of their van. Now I want you to open your eyes. And he opens his eyes to a blue Lamborghini. How amazing is that? So open your eyes. Imagine that you're seeing a blue Lamborghini. And that's exactly what Omar got to see. And it's because of individuals like you that wishes are able to come true. So a huge thank you to the Norris Group. You guys are absolutely amazing. I've loved getting to know you over the year. I think I may have been on a whole 3 weeks the last year's event. But Bruce, Aaron, Joey, the whole team, thank you for all that you do. I Survived Real Estate. It's a phenomenal event. And I want to say that we've been together working in partnership since 2008. And you guys, it's amazing. It's almost $1 million to support our community. And Make-A-Wish just wants to say a huge thank you for our partnership since 2012 in receiving almost $400,000 in support of making wishes come true. So thank you. You guys have a fabulous event. And I appreciate you inviting us in to share a little bit more about our mission to treat those individuals, those kids between the ages of 2.5 and 18 with a wish of a lifetime who are dealing with a critical illness. So have a great event.
Thanks, Gloria. Oh, if you are in Riverside and would ever like to stop by the Norris Group office, we have hallways of all the plaques that we typically have, and I would love you to come and take pictures with them. It's a lifelong work. It's been an honor and just been really fun. So the sponsors here tonight, I just really appreciate you and your continued support for this event. It's just not possible. Our community has just been really awesome over the years, and I appreciate it. With that, I am going to officially hand the reins over to somebody that has been in the business for almost 40 years as a real estate investor, builder, a hard money lender. He hosts the Norris Group's weekly award-winning podcast and takes great joy in charts, yellow lining, real estate research papers, and legislation, regulation, and does his very best to advocate for an industry he loves very much. Joining us all the way from Florida tonight, 3 hours later, Bruce Norris. Hey, Dad.
Hey, Aaron, how are you?
I am good at the Norris Group, hanging out. I think there's some people who think I've gone away now that I'm full time with Property Radar, but I'm just undercover in the background at the Norris Group. So I'm still here. Yes, full time Property Radar during the day, and we're about to go national. It's very exciting, living my best life. But over the last few weeks, you've been interviewing the Pastroni winners. If you could sum up some of the advice and some of the things that they've been saying over the last couple of weeks, what would you say?
I think it's what's common to all of those people was their reputation is spotless, that they conduct their business in an honest manner, and that allows them to do multiple transactions with the same families for decades. And that's why we created the award, was to honor those people in our industry that not only had the ability to do the business, but did it in such a way that it was honorable, to such a great extent that when they taught people, they also taught that piece of it. And that's awesome.
We've even had some of the longtime favorite guests. Doug Duncan's been on the radio show, Sean O'Toole. Real estate seems to be faring pretty well, consider all things being considered. How are you feeling about real estate now that you're parked in Florida?
Well, as you know, we're building homes, and I would say the average length of time for us to sell a home is about 20 hours. I mean, honestly, it's so fast. So did I think this would occur? No. And so it's going to be very interesting to hear the comments tonight of all these different people from different areas. Because in 2019, you know, at the end of 2019, we had the best set of charts and no movement in price. 3 months later, we start a pandemic, and now we're off to the races. So if I'm the only one scratching my head, then that's okay. I'll learn from the rest of them. But I'm surprised at what's gone on. And I think I was thinking about it today. Of course, I knew we were going to talk about it a little bit. I think some of it might be you have reduced inventory because somebody just refied their house at 2.5 and they say, I'm staying. So I think you might have reduced inventory for that reason. What was really interesting is when the pandemic started, listings got pulled off the MLS because I think everyone thought, okay, well, this is going to be a price damage and I'm not going to participate in it. So you had a lot of listings come off. I don't know that they've ever gone back on. But certainly I think California has about 2 months supply, which is for California about as low as it gets. And so we have off to the races pricing, very affordable, affordability, if you will. I think it's 32 or 33%, but all that was in place in 2019 with no results. So I'm excited to hear all these smart people help me understand what the heck's going on.
You've been threatening to move to Florida for years, and in July, you took all of 30 days to pick up and just leave us behind. What made you finally decide to pull that trigger?
You know, I think honestly, it was something that my wife was concerned about California. And so I took that to heart. As you know, that's one of my main things in life is to put a smile on my wife's face. So as far as the economics of it, I was fully involved in saying that was a great idea because I've already invested most of my money in Florida. And so I was already happily there. I liked the product that I had and all that. Of course, very big thing saying goodbye to friends and family, but there's a plane. I'll be there next week and we can do, and the Norris Group is still thriving and still doing fine. And now we're doing business on the East Coast.
I'm going to ask you one question because I think it's important to frame tonight. I get most of this questions from realtors, but I think we should cover it. Would you buy a piece of real estate in California today?
Sure. If I was going to live in California, I'd rather own a home. And if I was going to borrow money, I think I'd rather borrow it in this in this year than any other year.
So you
So
still
sure,
believe in home ownership?
absolutely. That's a very, very important thing to me, as you know.
I do, and it's important to cover. We're all we love this industry, and it's important. And I know we're going to be talking a lot about how crazy it is right now. What are some things that you would love to hear tonight?
One thing I'd like to bat around, and I'm glad you brought it up, is how important real estate ownership is that I think our industry has to figure a way how to reach across the aisle to the have-nots. And one of the ways you can do that, and we have a voice, you have a voice, Sean O'Toole has a voice. A nothing down loan program would probably make a ton of sense right now. We always talk about affordable housing. We don't need to lose 100 grand a house. We have 2.5% interest rates. That's affordable housing. All across the country, they don't have 700 grand median house price. They have 250 grand median house price. Match a 2.5 mortgage with that. Put a nothing down mortgage on whatever your failure rate. Here's the big problem. Everyone says, okay, well, that's going to create tons of foreclosures. Well, just have a different foreclosure process for that loan program, period. One foreclosure process for all 50 states. If you're delinquent on your payment for 6 months, it goes to trustee sale. The opening bid is the interest payment, never becomes an REO. Somebody buys it for 6 payments. If the overbid comes, then the people that were in it get it, fine. But I think we have to have real estate be part of the solution. Aaron, as you know, ownership was a big deal to me, really big deal. I still remember the emotion I felt when I was 21 years old, mowing my grass on a Saturday. And I actually teared up while I was doing it because I realized I owned a house and I felt like a man for the first time. That's how impactful that was to me. And so I think the way society is right now, I think we better reach across the aisle and let people have a chance. Because once you have equity, as this stuff starts, as your loan starts paying down, as your payment is less than rent, you have spendable money, and eventually you get some equity and you can start being entrepreneurial. And I think that's what people need that aren't there. So I think our industry collectively ought to maybe break some rules and say, you know what, we're going to take a risk and let people in that we haven't before.
Amen to that one. Well, shall we get started?
Absolutely.
Let's do this. All right. First up in the hot seat, Paul Herrera in the Inland Empire. How you doing?
Hey, Aaron. Good. How are you doing?
I am so grateful you're here. You do a lot of work in the Inland Empire, in the real estate advocacy and governmental affairs. You've been in the industry, in the public relations industry for a really long time, and I am very interested to hear what's going on. We're going into an election. There's quite a few things at stake here in California. The mic is yours.
Thanks, Aaron. This has just been a year that if you gave me all of the factors that went into this year and said, now tell me what's going to happen, I couldn't put together the outcome of the last 10 months. I think Bruce is right on with this uncertainty. And because of how different this year has turned out from what you might have guessed by seeing what's there, it's very difficult to look out 6 or 8 months with a lot of confidence and say, I know what's going to happen going forward. I think all of us are not just living this in a professional manner, we're living this in a personal manner and seeing it, how it impacts our day-to-day lives. I'm actually right now standing in a home we bought in San Diego that we're starting to move into. I've got my place in Riverside still. I'll apologize for being a little underdressed. All of my dress clothes are back in Riverside in the closet. And the only button-up shirt I found in my closet here is a silk burgundy shirt that I'm forbidden from putting on and showing to anybody, apparently. Teresa won't let me. I'm still proud of it, though. So we actually bought this house. We went into contract to buy this house on March the 6th. And a week later, COVID hits in a way that we finally have to recognize. And I think I had my last in-person meeting, a business meeting, on Friday, March the 13th. Friday the 13th of March was my last in-person meeting. And we didn't know whether we should go through with purchasing this house in San Diego or not. We didn't know what was going to happen. But there was this blip of interest rates in which that weekend we got a 2.85% interest rate. And a few days later, it was like 3.4%. And the owner essentially said, I want to get this done. So we got the deal done, and we couldn't turn away that 2.85, given that this is a house we plan to be in forever. And we went through that whole process. We closed in 30 days as we watched so many items of uncertainty start to hit the industry. I mean, you look at this year, when January comes around, we have a very strong economy. The state budget is $20-30 billion in surplus. The governor and legislature is trying to figure out where to spend all this extra money that they hadn't planned on collecting. We're looking at trying to tackle some big problems in housing affordability, and they're trying to figure out, how many things can we get done with a strong economy at our back. And then by the end of March, we're just trying to figure out the depth of the fall and what that's going to mean to the economy and to our ability to maintain basic things that are going to have to take place. Ben Benoit and I, starting, I don't know, probably March the 20th, are starting to field all kinds of issues that we had never dealt with before in the Inland Empire. Rent control initiatives, eviction moratoriums. Aaron, you were part of many of those discussions in some of the cities in our area. Cities that had never, raised a thought about placing burdensome restrictions on landlords saw massive need. And, you can understand the reason, because you have, COVID forcing people home and away from their jobs and away from their incomes at the same time that, landlords are in the very same place where, their income's threatened, and possibly this might be their income that threatens so much that they've worked for over the years. On my side, we didn't know at the end of March how real estate transactions were even going to happen. There was no exclusion that allowed real estate practitioners to go out and do anything, put up a yard sign, show potential buyers through a home, draw up title documents, home inspections, repairs. And I had to map out the entire process from listing appointment to final closing documents and try to figure out a way to put together a solution for each piece of it. And then in mid-April, we got essential industry designation that worked out a lot of those issues. But for a month there, we just didn't know how that was going to work. We had to troubleshoot so many things that I'd never even thought about before. I do work in the Coachella Valley with the California Desert Association of Realtors. There's a lot of foreign buyers and owners that are there. And I got a call one day saying, hey, how do we get documents notarized? I've got a Canadian seller. They can't cross the border. The embassy's closed. They normally would get them notarized at the embassy, but the embassy's closed. So what now? And we found a couple of ways to work through that. We found that you could put it together with Canadian notaries through some registry process and in the mail. We found a way of using online notaries through Texas. We just had to figure out some way of getting through item A or item B that would be acceptable to the recorder's office or to whatever agency we're trying to work with. That's been 2020. It's been a year of adapting to very difficult circumstances that we have to find a way to address. But in the middle of all that, as this is taking place and as we're trying to get through the week and get through the month, there are systemic problems that were there when the year started that will be with us when the year ends. And I think the most powerful one is what Bruce is talking about with respect to the haves and have-nots in housing and how that's changing the politics and our ability to do simple problem solving. People look at polarization and they're rightly very worried about how much we've turned into a left and right clash as a country. And that has really undermined our ability to do basic problem solving. On things that we work on, there are a number of issues where we can't get either side to come together to some kind of practical agreement because both sides believe that they don't have to give up anything when you get to the extremes. And unfortunately, the extremes aren't that extreme anymore. They're closer to the mainstream of the parties. Well, that same polarization in California is really affecting the debate over housing. You have a median home price in California that's pushing $700,000. And the average Californian, which think of, I can think of myself, going back 15 years when I was renting. I could not have imagined how I go from there to home ownership in this environment with these costs, even with a very good income. It would have been so hard to think of where that's going to go. So you have the average California renter who doesn't see a path to home ownership, doesn't even believe it's going to be possible. And that changes the mindset of how they see home ownership. And now you have folks who look at just about anybody who can afford a home as somebody who is wealthy enough to not need any more breaks. So that brings more challenges to tax breaks that traditionally, like Prop 13, like the mortgage interest deduction, like other items that were created as a way of extending a stepladder to equity, to home ownership, to building family wealth, and now are seen as tax breaks for the wealthy because a homeowner is now a wealthy person in California. And that's poisoning our ability to problem solve and try to bring up that next generation of homeowners who are invested in their neighborhood, invested in their community. And you've seen what's happened with, Ben in particular, in the rental industry, has had to work on some very difficult issues, trying to figure out how does rental industry function in a world where they're seen as almost vultures to the economy when they're the ones actually, who own the housing that is being used by much of California where they need to be. And meanwhile, we're here with the supply-demand problem, which is the real culprit. The fact that California put so many restrictions on the ability to build. There's a reason why you can build a home profitably in Texas or in much of the country, sell it for $250,000, $300,000, and be just fine as a builder. And you can't get anywhere near that in huge parts of California. If that was possible here, then our affordability problem goes away a lot faster. But we've built, a series of gates to basic production of housing that for a generation has caused us to underproduce. And now we're here in a position where, we're in a much more difficult spot. So we find ourselves going into this election and into next year in a role of strategic retreat, trying to figure out what parts, where we have to take a few steps back in order to protect some essential parts of the policy that even allows profitable building, profitable landlord activity to take place. It's not easy. And it's really, it results in a lot of difficult conversations that we have with folks in our own industry when we try to explain why we have to give this piece over here in order to protect this essential section over there. I'll give you an example of something that's on the ballot next week. Realtors have put together a proposition called Prop 19. And Prop 19 does something we've been trying to get done for a very long time, which allows seniors 55 and older, disabled homeowners, and in this case, victims of natural disaster, to make their Prop 13 benefits portable and very easily move around the state, anywhere in the state, without seeing that tax increase associated with selling a home that you've been in for a long time and moving to another. But it also does something that some of our own members, and I'm sure some folks listening to this won't like, and that is it changes the rules around when homes are reassessed when they pass from parent or grandparent to child and grandchild. So it says that if the inherited home, if the child or grandchild moves into it, makes it a primary residence in the first year, then they keep their parents or grandparents' tax basis. If they don't, so if it's a rental or otherwise not a primary residence, then it's reassessed to current market value. That change results in basically offsetting the tax revenue losses that are done through the portability side, and actually results in a little bit extra revenue for the state. So it's a net tax increase. So the question is, why are we doing that? One big reason is because we're convinced that the state legislature and voters will do that to us in 2 years, and that they would have done it to us this year if we hadn't come together on a deal that at least allowed the money to stay within housing. The polling that we have on Prop 19 says that the removal and the changes to the inheritance tax side of it is far more popular than the portability part. And you'd think that, you know, our members feel that, okay, so we get the, you know, the nice sugar coating of tax portability that helps so many Californians move without, you know, facing a tax increase. And that wraps the bitter pill of this, of changing the rules on inheritances. The voters see it exactly the opposite. The voters don't want the tax portability because they don't want to grant another tax break to what they see as people who don't need them, folks who own houses, wealthy people in their view. But they're willing to hand that over if we reassess rental properties, if we reassess these you know, wealthy family inheritances that get pointed out in the press on a regular basis. That's, you know, but that's a real challenge because, you know, by the way, I haven't convinced my sister on this yet. She's going to inherit some rental property from her husband's side of things. And I try to explain to her, listen, it's not that this is the best way. We tried it the other way 2 years ago. We tried it without making any compromise. And the voters said, no way, knocked us down by 20 points. Is that a question or a timer? Timer? Okay, gotcha. So that's the background of what we're walking into and what's going to frame so many of our debates. The legislature, we'll find out who's in the legislature in 5 more days. It's not going to change a whole lot in California. The outcome of these legislative elections aren't going to shift many of the debates going on. But I haven't seen a moment of uncertainty as to what will be on the agenda for Sacramento to discuss at this level at any point that I can recall. You know, we know that housing affordability has been top of mind of voters the last couple of years. Governor Newsom ran on a pledge of we need to build a lot more housing. He seemed to understand the problem, diagnosed it right, and says we're going to, you know, pull out all the stops so that we can catch up and build, I think, 3.5 million units in 8 years. We're nowhere near that. And we haven't passed anything on the housing production side, just a couple little things around the edges. And honestly, the governor hasn't engaged on the level so that we can move some of those things. There's been game, not from the governor, but certainly from the legislature, some game playing around, you know, what can and can't be done. And in the end, the only thing that's passed has been additional restrictions on landlords that make, you know, making a living quite a bit more difficult. You know, we've created new pitfalls, we've created new ways to get in trouble, and we've particularly targeted these new regulations on small landlords, which is really, really unfortunate. You look at Prop 21, it's on the ballot next week. Prop 21 is laser targeted at trying to make life more difficult on smaller landlords. So you have, what Prop 21 would do is would remove some guardrails around what cities and counties and local governments can do with rent control. So counties and cities can enact rent control, but what they can't do is a few things. They cannot attach it to single family housing or 1 to 4 units or individually titled condos. They can't have what's called vacancy control, which means it cannot, when the unit's vacated, you can't keep it rent controlled, waiting for the next tenant to come in. Well, who does this really attach to? Small landlords are much more likely to have those, single family 1 to 4 units. Small landlords are the ones who know their tenants for 20 years and will be more likely to be generous with the rent and not raise it enough to keep up even with their own costs at times. That's who's primarily impacted. Now, fortunately, and I hope Ben has great news on it, the news I've seen has been pretty positive, that I don't think the voters are going for it. Again, next week we have Prop 15, which aims to undo essentially half of Prop 13 from 1978 to remove Prop 13 protections from commercial real estate, enacting the largest tax increase in California's history. And if you read any thread discussing this of policy folks that are working on 15, you very quickly get into, so when do we go after residential? And they'll say, well, let's wait until we get this part done, because to undo Prop 13 residential. They only kept it out of this one because they wanted to keep it as lean as possible while still enacting this large tax increase. So I'm very interested in what this next year is going to mean for our local market in particular. I'm looking at numbers that don't make any sense based on where we started the year. The median home price in the Western Inland Empire, which is essentially all of the two counties other than the High Desert, the Coachella Valley, and the Hamilton Jacinto area, is 460 is a figure I just got a little while ago. We have inventory up, we have sales activity up year over year. And we have job losses exploding. Even the Coachella Valley is doing very well, a place where they lost a lot of their economic drivers in the spring when COVID forced them to cancel major events, everything from the concerts to tennis tournaments. And they're quite sure that 2021 is going to be worse as far as not allowing those things to come back. And despite all that, you don't see any let up in housing, in the cost of housing or the amount of activity. The agents, the real estate offices seem to be doing quite well. And I can't help but have this feeling of, the coyote running off the cliff and, for some reason, gravity isn't taking hold. But you can see the fundamentals when you run back the tape, rewind and look at what's happened, you can piece together the story. But where does this take us at this point, and how do we keep a functioning problem-solving approach in City Hall, in Sacramento, and in Washington, D.C., or try to bring one back in many cases, when so much of this is going to be dependent on how we can solve some of those debates in policy circles. Aaron, can I tell one last anecdote?
Sure, please.
This is an example, and I won't say what city this occurred in, but Ben and I were both involved in this. As the pandemic was taking hold, and there was a lot of worry about what would happen to tenants who have lost their jobs, there was a city that sought to enact rent control. There were a couple council members that wanted to bring it forward, one in particular. And as they studied it, they realized, okay, the only version of rent control they can bring forward is one that would do almost nothing for anybody. It would have very little actual impact because of restrictions from the governor's office, because of restrictions placed earlier in the year. It was just symbolic at that point. And so it got to a point where we said, our association said, we're not even going to bother to oppose this because it doesn't do anything. It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't hurt anybody either, hardly at all. So we don't want to be set up as a piñata to be railed on when they decide, to find an enemy to go after and say these are the people who are opposing helping tenants. But what we were going to do is remember that in the middle of a health crisis, in which so much uncertainty was putting people at least mentally on the brink, if not actually on the brink, that someone was choosing to take that moment to grandstand and take actual debate time, take actual staff time to put forward a symbolic piece of legislation. And that's the kind of activity in politics that drives me nuts. and I think makes a lot of people crazy. And that's what we hope will not be what reigns as we go forward.
I don't know. I hate getting into politics, but I really thought the pandemic was going to be this generation's 9/11. I've been overwhelmingly disappointed by politicians that continue to debate a help that our current sitting president wanted to launch in summer. And it got political. And part of the reason is states like Texas and Florida, why should they make up for states like California that have mismanaged a pension system? Of course, it gets political, but the media isn't picking up that. And it's so nuanced. Good housing policy takes a decade. It doesn't fit nicely in election cycles, 2 to 4 years. And the builders, unfortunately, aren't represented online today, but they have the saying, forget NIMBYism, it's bananas. Build absolutely nothing near anything. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anythingers. I'm on several, housing initiatives. I'm on a housing task force. And of course, 2 months ago, they're like, well, we're just going to create a new fee. I'm like, do you guys hear yourselves? You're creating a new fee. I was like, are you shooting yourself in the foot against economic development because you're trying to charge more? I think we only have to look at LA's HHH fund, $1.2 billion to build, I think they wanted to build 6,000 units. They are on track of a median unit price of $530,000, with some affordable units, in quotes, going as much as $730,000 here in LA for affordable units. If they would just work with real estate investors and give us a chance, I think we would do far more with far less money, but that's just me. So
Yeah.
we are a little bit ahead of schedule. Let's get Ben involved. Ben is with the California Apartment Association. He was with us with Turmoil, and I begged him to come back because landlords are just nervous. Before COVID even started, we were having conversations. Half were worried about this economy doesn't make sense. I'm out of Dodge. Half was like, I'm tired of the political nonsense in California. And then COVID hit, and now it's just a free for all. Everybody's like, later. So I can't wait what you have to say. The mic is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Paul. What an excellent lead in. And, Paul mentioned tactical retreat, and I couldn't agree more. It feels like as policymakers or policy wonks that are trying to help create good policy or see good policy created in the state, we're constantly in a tactical retreat. I'm sure a lot of you right now are very frustrated with AB 3088, the COVID Protection Act, or Eviction Protection Act that's currently in place that came out of this summer's legislative cycle. And you probably think that this is such a horrible policy, and it's just, how could we have ever gotten here? But I want to go back for a second and recognize where we were just about 15 days before that bill was passed, because I think a lot of people don't know how far worse it could have been. The legislatures on the Assembly side and through the Senate Judiciary Committee and Appropriations Committee had passed a completely separate bill, AB 1436 by Senator Chu, or Assemblymember Chu. And this tenant protection bill went far beyond what finally came out with AB 3088. That had tenant protections in place, basically with not having to require anyone paying any rent until 2021. It had other financial pieces to it, as far as the landlord couldn't actually go after the tenant until 2022 for those missed payments of that entire time. It also prohibited the landlord from applying any security deposit money they already had to satisfy rent, even after that tenant left. And it also did not include some tax credits that were part of the mix of what was going on in the legislature maybe a week before that. That was a separate bill, AB 1410. So those are the things we were hearing in the media, and when everything sort of fell apart, we as an association really had to go into a tactical retreat, because we recognized that that bill was one vote away in the Senate to going into being law. So we fell back and we started negotiating at with the governor's office, and basically that's what came out of AB 3088. Now, AB 3088, we recognize is very onerous. It's all about going after and making it very difficult for landlords. Just like Paul mentioned. It does give some protections to the tenants. It gives some protections for evictions, but it truly puts the burden of all of that on landlords. And it makes it very difficult for small landlords that are frankly not used to this, used to being legislated like this, because for a long time there have been protections for both some eviction, but mostly for rent control and other pieces of the puzzle. That were there for those small homeowners or single family homeowners that aren't there anymore. This bill does bring into an effect where you cannot sell your home without a 60-day notice, but only then can you sell it for if you're going to be selling that home. You have to already be in a contract. So how do you get into a 60-day contract, then give notice, and then hope and pray that your tenant's going to move out? So I recognize that we have just many folks that are very frustrated by this. And we see that every day. We have a 1-800 number, a hotline that for anyone that wants to ever reach out to our groups in Sacramento. And we get these calls all day and all night regarding how they get out of their current rental situation. They want to know with this protection that the tenants have, when can they finally sell? When can they give notice? So when can they finally get out of this rental that they have and move on into something else? I find that very disturbing, and I think when Paul and I talk about various things that we see on the horizon, we both worry about the potential that there's just fleeing of Sacramento, or fleeing of California, with so many people. So that's something that, I recognize that, it's just such a difficult situation how we got to this AB 3088. But again, we were in such a bad shape. And Paul nails it on the head. It's Sacramento, and it's the politics of trying to make a headline. Politicians used to try and plant trees. They wanted to plant ideas and policies that would hopefully carry our country forward into the future. And so often now, all we see out of Sacramento is folks trying to create a headline. This is a headline so they can get reelected, or a headline so they can show their constituents they're fighting for them, not a headline to show that they're trying to actually make our state better. We rarely see that. And so I find it very disconcerting over this legislative session. And just like Paul said, this tactical retreat we sort of find ourselves in California. For anyone that wants to hopefully have investments and move forward in investing, it's a very difficult situation. So I was asked to sort of look forward what we see coming in 2021, and boy, it's a tough crystal ball to look through. It's about as foggy as it gets right now, especially looking forward to Tuesday with our election. But on the state side, we pretty much know what we're going to have in Sacramento. We're going to have a sort of the same legislative session, we think, with the very same characters for the most part, except for we're probably anticipating losing a few more Republicans. And as hard as that sounds, is further falling further to the left in our both legislative houses. And with that, our group is expecting that there will be more work on COVID protections for evictions, even though we feel that we've got a pretty good setup right now. And of course, the tenant protection groups will want to have more. We're also seeing right now that the tenant protection groups are already talking about making the current 15-day notice that's required under AB 3088 permanent. So right now, if you're used to giving a 3-day notice, now you have to give a 15-day notice. Of course, that's 15 days without including weekends or holidays. So almost a month could be time sometimes, as opposed to your regular 3-day notice. So that makes it very difficult for those folks that are struggling, where they've already got someone that's behind in rent. And Paul mentioned those small landlords. So often I see these small landlords being kind and forgiving, and finally get to the point where they finally feel that they have to serve a notice, and they're now so far maybe months behind, but yet they still have to wait another 15 days, and makes it so difficult. So, again, the administration is trying to make things so much harder on the big landlords, but it's really the small landlords that really take it very hard. Of course, the legislature, they do have extra budget money, as Paul mentioned, but they seem to be operating in it where they feel that they're going to go into a deficit. They feel like that Roadrunner 2, where the gravity hasn't hit them yet. So as much as the last couple of headlines have been about Sacramento having extra billions of dollars, we know that right now the governor's office is putting it out that they don't want to see any bills moving forward that have a cost. So what does that mean to you and I, as maybe there are other folks? That means that we're all going to have to pay for it. So again, they're going to put that burden on the landlords and on the folks that are the owners of the houses, as opposed to trying to find any meaningful fix that might have some finance behind it. We're also anticipating the attempts to provide legal representation for tenants facing eviction. We've heard of this before, but we're expecting those bills to come back again. And of course, again, the only way to pay for this then would be to show that increasing fees on landlords, or increasing fees on transactions, or some other way to create that legal representation funding. We've seen various ideas come up over the last couple of years in the legislature, but we're anticipating more next year. Of course, we're also hoping for renewed attempts for expediting housing production. As a CAA, we were supportive of a couple different bills. Of course, those bills didn't get very far this legislative year, but we're hopeful that next year maybe it might be different. But we recognize that the true meaningful fixes, as far as for changes to our entire setup, or how we go about producing houses, and how we're doing that as far as California, and how we're stopping that, needs some serious overhaul. And I'm convinced that this governor just does not seem to be, like Paul said, really getting engaged on that. So whether or not we'll see anything like that meaningful coming forward, I don't know. Of course, there will also be some bills, I'm sure, to address our homeless crisis that continues to go on. Although I hear from different areas that the homeless seems to be better. Although I hear, like San Diego, I hear that it's much worse in downtown. So I'm not sure where that's going to go, but we do know that we expect to see some of that. So that's sort of where we're at and where we see ourselves from the Apartment Association side. We recognize that there's just so many questions and so much difficulty with the new legislation. Of course, I don't want to, sound like a record, but we do have a lot of this on our website. So if anyone needs that, it's out there. But of course, we're an association and we'd love to see you join. But most importantly, we all know we all need to get through this together. So quite a bit of it was actually free for a long time on our website during the beginning part of this COVID disaster. But more and more of it now is behind a paywall. My apologies for that, but that's just how we have to move forward.
Nope. Understand. And Paul, we'll bring you back. We've got a little bit of time for questions because I know, Ben, you can't stay the entire time. I would like to point out here in the Inland Empire, 211, I happen to be on the board. I know of a landlord in the Inland Empire who got $500,000 to help over 120 families that were behind on rent. This was a grant. Our local United Way has gotten over $30 million in funding via government grants from the CARES Act, as well as private donations. I know a lot of people online, you invest in other counties beside your own. 211 is a health and human services hotline. The number one reason people call the hotline over the years, even before COVID, it was real estate related. When you have tenants or you call them, you'll be given a laundry list of government programs, from everything from food stamps to utility assistance to potentially understanding what kind of resources are available to you as a landlord. And you might have to get a little bit more involved and help your tenants to get through the process. But please, please, please call your local 211, go on the website. Some of these grants are available and people just don't know. They're not looking. So you've got national, state, and local resources that some people just don't even know about. Ben, at some point, it makes me feel a little uncomfortable, like taxation without representation. Is there any lawsuits going on from the perspective of the landlord? Because the legislature has gone a little bit too far and it's feeling we're getting feed to death. At what point do we get to have a say?
Couldn't agree more. I'll tell you, our association, to be quite frank, we're looking for that perfect plaintiff. Recognize that right now, a lot of people are afraid to step forward and be that plaintiff. When we do sit them down with our attorneys, we explain to them that, look, your name will be known. Someone might find your address. How well known is that? If you Google yourself, can you find your own address? And if that's a yes, well, then, okay, you're willing to go along with this and be our plaintiff, but recognize you might have these tenant rights groups on your doorstep any morning that you might not know of. So that's frankly where we're at right now. We do recognize that this is right in the path of a takings lawsuit, but trying to find that perfect plaintiff. If any of you folks know that person, please give me a jingle. My phone number is on our website, but we are looking. And I truly believe that at some point this will come back. But what's interesting is Sacramento recognizes some of that, which is why a lot of this legislation does expire at a certain time. It'll have to be someone that definitely is had some loss and you can show that loss, and we'll have to be able to prove it, of course. And how we assign that to the state. There's lots of questions, but we are looking in that direction.
I would just encourage everybody, depending on what kind of industry work you're doing. If you build a lot, please join the Builders Association. If you're doing a lot of landlording, please join the state organization. And if you're a realtor, just participate. I always encourage people to get on boards, become a trusted expert. The only reason I got to sit on the Housing Council, and they trust me, I come with a data approach. It's realistic. They know that I'm not there. I'm being genuine, trying to help. I don't believe in some of the things that they're trying to do is going to work. We just got our updated affordable housing numbers here in Riverside. We have to build 13,000. How do we get to that number if we don't get creative? I showed the Housing Council, it included the county and the city, and I said, there's over 10,000 lots, over 10,000 square feet in the city of Riverside. Half of those are owned by landlords. Half of those are further out of the area. They live in another county. So they're not paying attention to you. They don't know that accessory dwelling units are possible. These are people that have the properties, they have the experience, have access to private financing. They're already landlords. Tell them that you need affordable housing and put some money behind it. And they looked at me like I was crazy. But with our voices at that local level at the city government, if we're trusted, they're doing the best that they can. You have to understand at the other side of the coin, they've got people who are really struggling, near homelessness, can't eat. You've got kids that typically rely on the school system for almost 90% of their meals, stuck at home with parents that can't get to work. It's complicated. So thank you for all the work that you and Paul do. I understand how difficult and frustrating it is. I don't know how you do it. Paul, if you're moving to San Diego, does this mean that we're losing you in the Inland Empire?
No, I'm not moving to San Diego.
Okay.
I'll be staying in Riverside, but I'm here quite a bit. So right now, my since I have no meetings in Inland Empire, I just come here on Thursday night and go back to Riverside on Monday night.
All right.
Still be
When
around.
when it comes to practical ways that local real estate professionals can be involved, what would you suggest?
First and foremost is just to keep an eye on the materials that we put out, either locally or from the state level. Just know what's happening, because just staying up to date, even on new laws. Like every year, there's a compendium of here are all the new laws that are going to affect you come January 1st. That should be coming out any day now, actually. So things like that are the primary benefit, just to stay abreast of what's going on. The association, in the past it was in-person meetings, but now it's all Zoom. So it becomes a lot easier to join a educational session or listen to a speaker online. You can put it on the background and make some breakfast, and you pick up a lot of what's going on. At the end of the day, if the members are able to lend their time to communicate with us, I mean, the role that Ben and I have is really to find out precisely what is happening to impact the business of our members, and then translate that into some kind of troubleshooting or fix when we need to do that, or find opportunities where we can make it better. So the more our members engage with us, contact us, talk to us, my cell phone's freely available out there. I'll give it to you right now, 951-500-1222. I love hearing from the members. And even if you're not sure whether the issue you're dealing with has any kind of basis in some kind of public policy, I want to hear about it, because it may. Chances are it has something, and we can try to find a way to address it. But we only know the things that people talk to us about or that we encounter personally. So that's it. Just make sure you talk to us so that we have a chance to fix the things that you see going on out there.
Ben, same question for you. What would you like to see maybe mom and pop landlords do that you think might be practical and helpful?
Sure. Yeah. Just like Paul says, just try and it's so difficult. It seems like every couple of weeks we got something new coming from Sacramento or a local jurisdiction. Our organization has really been trying lately to try and break down by jurisdiction the compliance materials that are required by each city. We're trying to get that out there to our members. So if you're looking to make an investment in another jurisdiction, we hopefully already have some of that data. Frankly, we're only probably at the top 25 cities right now. We're trying to drill down further. So, California being such a diverse area, it's very difficult to do that. We're working on that very strongly to basically create a compliance database for all of our members. Because we recognize that most people can't keep up on all this. It's very difficult too, as we're going through the legislative cycle, sometimes just to make contact, like Paul said. I'm the same way. Please, if you have a thought or something affecting you, if you've got a story about how you're being financially impacted, I'd love to hear it. And I put you on my list to make sure when we do have an opportunity to make contact in Sacramento. And just like Paul said, the meetings are all on Zoom. Well, so are the state capitol meetings. We did have some success with the Senate Judiciary Committee. We had over, I want to say it was close to 250 small mom and pop landlords call into the Judiciary Committee. Now, of course, Judiciary Committee is not like your local city. They're not required to give 3 minutes like we are in local jurisdictions. They limited it down to you have to say if you're for or against. But for a lot of our smaller landlords, they were able to sneak in a few words of cautionary tales of, hey, this is my only income and I'm losing my own home over this. And that did weigh on some of the Senate Judiciary Committee members. Unfortunately, they still voted across party lines. And in fact, someone asked in the chat, what do these legislators say when we tell them you're putting all this on the landlords and this is close to because you get to a takings? Well, it's not only that they don't care, they feel that their constituents feel that this is the only thing that will save them from what Aaron put out there, this draconian situation that they find themselves in, where they're unfortunately, on their last meals. It seems like some of these renters. So we hear it coming from the other side too, and that's the tough part these legislators have. But for the most part, it's these party line votes that really make it difficult over the years, and get us some really horrible legislation at the end of the day.
Some of the bills that passed in September that Newsom signed, SB 1079, Trustee sale investors, I called some of the largest ones in Southern California. It was not on their radar. Starting in January, the state of California has a 45-day redemption period. So if you as an investor buy something at the courthouse steps and within 15 days, an eligible buyer has the opportunity to raise their hand with the intent to buy. What that means is they have a full 30 days after that to make good on that. They have to have a cashier's check. However, you as the investor are still going to be responsible for things like insurance, all the things that could cost you along the way. And the bill does not have a provision of you making up for that. The eligible buyer, which could be a government entity, a new owner occupant, or a nonprofit, could buy that for at the same price or $1 more, and you are going to be stuck with the joy of the expenses for holding for 45 days, including potentially unrecorded city liens. Hilarious. It would have been much more effective if they dealt with this in sort of like a short sale process, sort of before it went to trustee sale. This is probably going to actually increase foreclosures in the state of California, because a lot of the trustee sale buyers is like, why would I take that risk? I'll wait for it to go back as an REO. Do you really think the new tenant buyer is going to be prepared to deal with homeowners that are holdovers? Probably not. It's just a mess. And Skinner, the legislator who did it, it was well-meaning, but it was frustrating to hear the process that attorneys and our professional associations tried to do. Holy cow. My other favorite one had to do with accessory dwelling units. One of the tricks that HOAs were trying to do is just like, hey, you know what? No, ADUs is going to bring you over this 25% threshold as a rental in our HOA. So yeah, you can't build one. Newsom signed a bill in September that basically doesn't allow HOAs to consider accessory dwelling units as well as junior accessory dwelling units as part of that equation. So if you've got condos like me, you could eventually turn those garages into extra units, and there's really nothing at this point that an HOA can do. The state's trying. They're doing some very weird things. It's been unusual to see the state put the smackdown and take away local rights. So even the state is fighting back a little bit, understanding that they're part of the problem. But Paul, Ben, any last words, any favorite bills that you just shook your head and laughed at and said, how did this pass?
We had one that didn't pass, but would have had a lot of impact on the folks listening to this call. There was a piece of legislation that said that anytime a property with a tenant in it would be offered for sale, it first had to be offered to eligible nonprofits who had the first right to bid on the property and to try to close a sale on it. And only after that process was completed and no sale was done could they move on to actually market the property to the full market, for whatever fair price they could get. That was in process back in August. Fortunately, they didn't get through it, but that doesn't mean it's not coming back in January.
Yep.
Ben, any favorites?
No, that was definitely, Paul hit that one, but there's just so many, it's hard to keep track. I mean, it's just amazing what this Sacramento can put out. But a lot of it, though, is a bit of a shell game. And we'll see some of these bills that Paul and I, you say shake our heads at, we go home and cry into our whiskey. But, the reality is we realize that some of these are a shell game to get up through these different committees, get it out, and then get it to the other house, even through a couple of those committees, knowing that, this would be a horrible upset to the economy and everything else, but they get it that far so that they can start negotiating, and what comes out of negotiations are not much better. So it's just been a struggling couple of years, and we've been seeing this tactic, and it's so frustrating, but it's the state we live in. And I think that you do see finally some opportunities for people fighting back. One other piece of thing we've been sort of looking at or dwelling on is maybe we do a proposition as a tenant landlords, and how do we do that, and what would that look like, and what protections would we want to try and get in there. But then you have to balance that out. How, just like Paul's organization had to balance out their proposition. What do you need to give up? What's that tactical retreat that you're going to give up so you can get your piece of legislation through, and maybe have everybody vote on it in the state of California. But at the end of the day, it's just such a difficult situation we all find ourselves in, not only with COVID, but just with the ongoing drama of Sacramento politics that really is affecting everybody right now. And you nailed it on the head earlier. It's the haves versus have-nots, and how do we fix that? And how do we change that dichotomy? And I strongly agree with you. I think there's got to be some opportunity to bring people into the mix of home ownership. I recognize my first day I had that feeling too of mowing that lawn. It is something special, and we just need to help bring people into that fold. And I think then people will recognize that that's what they've been missing out on for a long time, and then that we can all start moving forward and all start investing together and investing in our communities, investing in all of our neighborhoods. I think that's probably the most one of the most special things I've seen come out of COVID in my own city is driving our neighborhoods and looking at all these homes that people are finally investing in. The folks that, and especially in my area, they're longtime commuters. They're finally looking at the front of the house going, boy, it really needs a paint job, and they're doing it. And that's something I think is special and one of those positive things that have come out of COVID. But we need more of that. We need to bring more people into that fold.
Very good. I really appreciate you two setting the stage for this first part of the residential town hall. One question, how do you see the new California homestead exemption impacting the market?
Which exemption?
The California homestead exemption, to where if the bill passes, that you'd be able to move as a senior or impacted by a disaster.
I'm sorry, the realtors. Yeah. Maybe we can take that, Paul.
Yeah, I thought that was referring to the legislation that just passed, changing the homestead exemption when you're a debtor, and what you can protect. But as far as the one that we're doing, the estimate from the State Legislative Analyst's Office, as well as our own market research, is that it'll increase transactions statewide by between 65,000 and 80,000 statewide, which is actually quite a change. That's on the basis of about 400,000 transactions statewide. So looking at 15 and 20% additional inventory that's actually produced on both sides of the equation. One is seniors, and we did a lot of market research on this, seniors who are staying in their home would like to move but don't because they fear the tax increase. A lot of them will be freed up to make that move. And then on the rental side, there will be some additional incentive for some people who inherit that property to put it in the market and sell because they're not getting that additional tax benefit from keeping the old basis. So on that side of things, there's a piece of benefit.
If you're thinking about heading out of town, I talked to an investor last month who moved to Arizona. He recommends that everybody change your license plate as soon as possible. He was chased down on more than one occasion and harassed for his California license plates. Florida last year, I was told 3 times in one trip to keep my California politics at home. Just tell them you're Canadian. I don't know what to tell you. All right, guys. Dad, any last questions for our legislative panel? You're on mute, Pops. And by the way, it was a question. Daniela was asking about the bill that passed, the $300,000, but complicated evaluation. Paul, can you speak to the homestead exemption? I think it's the one that you were mentioning.
Okay. That one, so I'm not as familiar with it because we've had this antiquated homestead exemption that is used to protect, it's meant if you're a debtor or if you're in a lawsuit, you can protect X amount of your home's valuation. And I think it was stuck at like $30,000 for a long time. It wasn't adjusted upwards. And now it's at I think it's like $300,000 or the average of the homes in your area, whichever is highest, something along those lines. It shouldn't have any real impacts on in any significant way on the real estate market. But I mean, individuals who find themselves in financial trouble can protect more of their home.
Okay.
I do have a question.
Okay.
There are 3 rules in real estate that if I were on the other side of the table, that I would be able to argue against them existing. And of course, I'm on the real estate side, but I want to know if there's any consideration about doing away with depreciation. And I'll just give you an example. I've been able to depreciate a house that I am now in escrow in that according to tax laws has gone down in value, and it's gone up about 500% since I've owned it. I just sold a residence, and that's tax-free gain because I've lived there for more than 2 years, or whatever the new rule is. I've lived there for a longer time. And I have another exchange that's going on that I've owned a commercial property. So the three holy grails of real estate, the 500 grand tax-free when you own a residence, is that going to be under attack? Is depreciation going to be under attack? Because this stuff doesn't go down, it goes up. And 1031 exchanges.
Good question.
So the capital gains exclusion, the $500,000, it's been bandied about, and it was part of a version of the tax law from 2018.
Right.
It was part of the initial passage. So when it passed the House of Representatives, it had a reduction in the capital gains exclusion that was later removed by the Senate and the concurrence bill. 1031 has not been under serious challenge in Congress, but that could change this coming year. There's definitely talk about changing 1031 exchange usage. It's pretty well defended by Republicans in Congress. We've never seen a serious threat to it from Democrats in Congress, but the tides are changing out there. The depreciation piece of it, I haven't seen any talk about that. And some of these things, some of these exclusions aren't exactly fitting with the populist revolts that we've seen really in both parties and across the country. And so we usually sneak them into a giant omnibus bill sometime in December each year, when we have like a week to go in, before the government shuts down. I don't know if that option is going to be with us. We usually have what's called like a tax extenders bill, in which we take all the little tax loopholes that we want to pass and the public wouldn't want to know about, and we stuff it into this giant document so that no one gets tagged for it. We'll see if we can do that going forward.
Okay, I was just curious because those three are big deal for real estate, and just the mood of the people that have wealth and how to make it look unfair. That would be three things that I would mention. I hope they don't change. I'm a real estate investor, but I'm concerned about them being seriously looked at.
My sense is there's bigger fish to fry, but those could get fried along with the bigger fish. Sometimes you get caught in the net.
Okay.
Thank you for tuning in to I Survive Real Estate 2020. To watch the full video in its entirety or to learn more about speakers and sponsors, please go to isurviverealestate.com and be sure to tune in next week for more I Survive Real Estate 2020. Thank you.